Of the hour, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thank you for taking some time to learn about the current issues around identity theft and fraud in honor of Identity Theft Awareness Week. As some of you may have heard, we were having a few technical issues with Zoom, and so I am going to be I am not driving, and I'll be calling out the slide numbers so that for folks that particularly our partners that may not be able to see the slides, we at least can follow along that way. I'm Eva Velasquez, President and CEO of the Identity Theft Resource Center. We're a national nonprofit established to guide victims, consumers, businesses, and government in both recovery from these crimes and the best practices to reduce risk and mitigate the impact. Shameka Walker, Identity Theft Program Manager with the Federal Trade Commission, is also here. Welcome, Shameka.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here, and hosting for the FTC as well.
I'm so glad we're doing this together. This is going to be some great information. We have always enjoyed a long time and good partnership with the FTC since we're fighting the same fight. And just a bit of housekeeping, folks, is the presentation portion of this webinar is 30 minutes long, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end for questions. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat function, and you don't have to wait to the end. You can put them out there as soon as you think of it. And then Alex Hamilton from the ITRC will be monitoring those as we go, and she'll call them out at the end. And don't worry, if we don't get to all the questions during the Q&A session, we will respond to you directly by email. So next slide 2, please, Alex. Look, it's been a very challenging year for everyone, except I think sometimes it feels like not for the thieves and the fraudsters. Both the FTC and the ITRC have seen a significant increase in reports of identity theft and related fraud, as well as an increase in the demand for services around those reports. And we've definitely seen the thieves leveraging the current landscape, and we are going to jump into that. Just as a reminder, there are many different types of identity theft, and we are going to cover some of those today, but not to scare people, but there are so many different types. We won't get to all of them. And with that, Shameka, I will hand it off to you to get us started.
Okay, good afternoon to some and good morning to everyone else. And thank you again, Eva. So this week kicks off Identity Theft Awareness Week at the FTC, now that it's February. And as Eva mentioned, we're going to talk about a few different types of identity theft that have been, which the pandemic has impacted. The first being unemployment benefits identity theft, which is also called unemployment insurance identity theft. So since the start of the pandemic, we have been hearing about widespread fraud where imposters have been filing claims for unemployment benefits using the names and personal information of people who have not filed claims. Payments made as a result of these fraudulent claims went to identity thieves and not to people whose names and personal information were used. The fraud has hit a number of states. It's being investigated by several federal law enforcement agencies as well as state agencies. This type of identity theft isn't new, as I'm sure you know. It's been around for years, but because millions of people lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a huge increase in the amount of people who actually applied for benefits. So fraudsters took advantage of the situation. So a lot of times people only learn about this fraud when they get a notice from their state unemployment benefits officer or their employer about a supposed application for benefits. So last year in 2020 at the FTC, we received 394,280 reports about government benefits fraud, overwhelmingly about identity theft involving unemployment insurance benefits, compared to the 12,900 reports that we received in 2019. So it's February 1st and it's tax season. So some people might soon be getting a 1099-G tax form showing that they got unemployment insurance benefits that they really never received. And like I mentioned, it's because that the money actually went to an identity theft instead. So the IRS recently issued some guidance about what to do if this happens to you. Essentially, the agency is encouraging people to contact their state unemployment insurance agency to get a corrected 1099-G form. And while they're waiting for that corrected form, the IRS is encouraging people to file their tax return, reporting only the income that they actually received. You can go to the IRS's website for more information. The FTC's guidance on what you can do to recover from unemployment benefits identity theft is evolving, but you should report this type of identity theft immediately to your state unemployment benefits office and your employer. Be sure to keep a copy of any confirmation that you get. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but it's also a good idea to consider a credit freeze, because if someone has or is misusing your information, a credit freeze is the most important step that you can take to prevent further identity theft. Eva?
Next slide, please. And this is really just to add to what Shamika is saying. We have seen something similar at the ITRC Center. This has historically always been a problem. In 2019, we had about 14 calls into the center about unemployment ID theft. And I just want people to understand that there were a number of factors that went into the why. Why did this become so prevalent during the pandemic? And Shamika touched on some of those, but another one was, let's keep it real, it was more lucrative. When we add the stimulus dollars and the relief dollars that were put into these programs, and rightly so, that needed to be done. But what that created was a more lucrative opportunity for the thieves, and they're lazy and they want to get as much money as they can. And then because we lifted some of the verification processes, again, rightly so, we needed to do that. But a lot of the ways that the states could verify that you are actually you, those had to be lifted because of the pandemic. And that sort of created this perfect storm. And just to give it a little bit more context, these numbers from ITRC, these are through November of 2020. This is ongoing. It is continuing to happen and people are continuing to discover it. In fact, in the state of California, I think it was just last week, they reported that they are looking at 11 billion with a B in just this type of fraud, just this type of identity theft. And it is happening all across the country. So we're not out of the woods yet. And in fact, we've had 145 cases just in the month of January this year, January 2021. So please be vigilant, be on guard. If you get a notification or something saying that you applied, don't just think it's a weird, oh, that must be a mistake. Please follow up on those and follow up directly with your state department that administers those benefits. All right, next slide, please, Alex.
Okay, next I'll go over identity theft related to small business administration loans. Economic injury disaster loans have always been available, but last year, because of the pandemic, the program was expanded thanks to the CARES Act. It was expanded to help small businesses and nonprofits who are experiencing a temporary loss of revenue because of COVID-19. So these types of loans are serviced by the SBA. Identity theft occurs when someone applies for an economic injury disaster loan using your Social Security number or your business EIN. Another SBA loan program is the Paycheck Protection Loan. This is an SBA loan that helps businesses keep their workforce employed during the pandemic. But unlike the economic injury disaster loan, these loans are serviced by lenders. And here, identity theft occurs when someone files for one of these loans using your Social Security number or your business EIN. This is another dynamic situation, and so the FTC's guidance on what you can do to recover is evolving, but our main advice is to go to the source. And what I mean by that is if someone applies for an economic injury disaster loan using your Social Security number, you should first contact the SBA. And then after that, go to IDTheftWeek to report the identity theft to us at the FTC, where you can get a step-by-step recovery plan. And then lastly, you should check your personal credit reports regularly. You can do so by going to annualcreditreport.com, where you can get a free credit report from each of the three credit bureaus through April. If someone has applied for a PPP loan using your Social Security number, again, go to the source. So in this situation, you'd contact the lender first that issued the loan and report the fraud to them. After that, you go to IDTheftWeek.gov to report the fraud to us at the FTC, and then check your personal credit reports. If you're concerned that someone took out an SBA loan in your company's name, check your company's credit report, and you can get your company's credit report from Experian or Equifax or some smaller credit reporting services. And one final note on this matter from me, last year we received 99,650 reports of fraud involving business or personal loans compared to 43,920 reports in 2019. So the number of reports that were received more than doubled. When not all of these new reports, so not all of the new reports can be attributed to a government relief effort. A sizable share of the can be attributed to that. Eva?
It helps if you unmute your mic. So yes, I will just follow up and say on the SBA loans, two things. One, this can happen to individuals with the use of your social security number. I've talked to a number of folks who think that because they don't own a business, they never owned a business, they don't have an EIN, that it can't happen to them. The thieves can just make up a fictitious sole proprietorship using your SSN. Now, these are usually smaller dollar amounts, but they don't feel small when you get a $10,000 or $25,000 bill in the mail saying it's going to be time for you to start making your repayments. And then the second thing that I would say is to just mirror what Shamika was saying. You need to document all the steps that you take. So make sure that you are keeping track of who you talked to, when, for how long, what instructions they gave you and told you to do, and what follow-up you did. And if you're looking for a tool to do that, we have our free ID Theft Help app, and we have a case log feature that will allow you to very easily keep track of those things. Just a reminder, please don't put any of your PII in the app. That's just not a best practice. So this is a great place for you to keep notes and following up on timelines, but don't put any of your identity credentials actually in the app. And that's all I have to say on that one. Next slide, Alex.
So it's tax season, and of course we have to mention tax identity theft. This is when somebody files a fraudulent tax return using your social security number. And the reason why they're doing it is to get a refund. So basically to claim your tax refund for themselves. To do this, all they need is your social security number. Then when you try to get your refund, you get a notice from the IRS saying that yours is a duplicate filing and your refund may be delayed. So tax identity theft is essentially tax refund fraud. But this slide also shows a few other types of identity theft that we include under the name of tax identity theft. It includes when someone uses your children as dependents, or when someone claims a refund using a deceased taxpayer's information. It can also include when someone earns wages under your social security number. Then when you file your return and listing the wages you actually earn, the IRS is wondering, why you didn't pay taxes on these other wages. To reduce your risk of identity theft, it's important to follow good filing practices. For example, you should know your tax preparer and file your taxes as early as possible. And when it comes to actually sending your returns to the state or IRS, don't put them in outgoing mail. Instead, mail them directly from the post office. And if you decide to file electronically, be sure to use a secure network. Lastly, you should store your returns securely and shred any drafts that you may have.
And I'll just piggyback on that last part, the file first. Look, we know that sometimes it's difficult to file as early as possible. You may be waiting for documents, but as soon as you possibly can, as soon as you're ready, putting it off just because it's unpleasant and we don't like it actually can create a vulnerability for you. You really want to beat the crooks to the punch. So please file first, beat the crooks. And also remember, I've talked to folks who say, well, I don't get a return, so I'm not vulnerable to this. But that is not how it actually works. Your true financial picture is largely irrelevant. They will structure things in such a way, just making things up and using, fraudulent documentation that they just make up to structure that return in a way that they get a refund. So again, your true status is not relevant. What are your identity credentials that they're using? Okay, Alex, next slide. Ooh, and here's
And
all
I
that good data from
Yeah.
Shamika. Take it away.
Right. Do you like my pretty picture?
I do.
I can't take credit for making this, but so let's take a look at what the FTC saw last year in 2020 with respect to identity theft reports. So this beautiful graph charts data through December 31st of 2020. Last year, we received about 1.4 million reports of identity theft, double the number that we received in 2019. The data shows that identity thieves targeted government funds earmarked to help people hard hit financially by the pandemic. So what you see here are the top 7 complaint categories for 2020. And those categories include bank fraud, credit card fraud, employment or tax-related fraud, government documents or benefits fraud, loan or lease fraud, other identity theft, and phone or utilities fraud. Every category increased compared to 2019, but the most dramatic increase was with the government documents or benefits fraud, which is the aqua-colored line that you see here, especially unemployment insurance benefit theft, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. As you can see, the line for unemployment insurance benefit theft was pretty flat from 2016 to 2019. Actually, it's for government documents. 2016 and 2019 was pretty flat. But then you'll see that there was a huge spike in 2020. And in 2020, the FTC also saw an increase in tax identity theft reports, which is the red line. It appears to have been driven by concerns about the lost economic impact payments that people received. So people told us about identity theft involving their federal stimulus payments from the IRS by reporting it as tax identity theft. In 2020, reports to the FTC of tax identity theft rose to 89,390 from 27,450 reports in the year before in 2019. So the reports tripled in that area. So a lot of these reports concern other types of tax identity theft, but the report numbers begin to swell when distribution of the stimulus payments began. And then for the third quarter, the numbers started to go down a little bit, but then that's likely because people were no longer receiving the payments. And now that we've just had another round of stimulus checks that have gone out, we're going to need to keep an eye on this to see if we see an increase in identity theft reports related to tax identity theft again this year.
All right, and
Eva?
next slide, please. And our experience is mirroring just that. So we did pull out this particular issue. It's a new issue. The economic relief payments, we don't have historical precedent for that, but you can see how many inquiries and cases we received in our call center, and they are continuing with this second round. They are continuing to come in, and really these issues run the gamut. It can be anything from dollars going into the incorrect bank account. Now that can be by error, or we did hear from people who had their accounts changed electronically through online systems. We also heard from folks who simply had a paper check or debit card stolen from their mailbox. So the thieves really used whatever means they could to subvert these payments. And again, it is going to continue into 2021, and we're definitely keeping an eye on that. Next slide, please, Alex. And I just want to touch on this. This may seem a little bit of a non sequitur, but I think it's important to talk about the root causes of the compromises, because these different types of identity theft that has just ballooned, this is because these credentials have been previously compromised. We just released a report on data breaches. And if you want to see that full report, it's on our website. It's free to the public. You can go and take a look at it. But the big takeaway from it is that while data breaches were down, fraud and the misuse of the credentials isn't. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the thieves were spending their time to leverage the credentials that they already had. And how were they doing that? How are they getting those credentials? Well, yes, it's been through past data breaches, but we saw a huge rise in phishing and ransomware. I won't get into too much detail about the ransomware, but the phishing is a really important piece. look, with work from home and a lot of folks just being online so much more and using email as a primary method of communication, where heretofore they had a variety of methods, it is really important that we be aware of how bad this problem is. And Shamika said it before, it was in another context, but the go to the source, that is a great line to remember. That's a great thing for you to think about in all of your online transactions and in all of these activities. If you did not initiate the contact, go to the source, because you need to make sure it's actually coming from where it says it's coming from. Is this really from the IRS? Is this really from my employer asking me for this information? Is this really from my IT department? Is this really an email telling me, alerting me to the fact that I have voicemails in my phone system? Please go back to the source, and that will help overall in the identity theft problem, because at the heart of it are the compromised credentials. That's what they're using to perpetrate these frauds. Next slide, please. And take it away, Shamika.
Thanks, Eva. So we've been talking a lot about the different types of identity theft, or a few different types, and the trends most recently. But now let's turn to some things that you can do to reduce your risk of identity theft, because that's what's most important. So first, and some of these things seem pretty obvious, but we can't emphasize them enough. The first thing is empty your purse or your wallet. So don't carry your Social Security card in your wallet, or write your Social Security number on a check or anything. Only give it out if it's absolutely necessary. You can always ask for to use another identifier. Next, I would say shred paperwork with personal information and financial documents before you discard them. Don't give out any of your personal information on the phone or through the mail or over the internet unless you're sure who you're dealing with. Don't use obvious passwords. So your mother's maiden name or the last 4 digits of your Social Security number are all obvious. And Eva will talk about this a bit in a minute, but you should try to use strong passwords that are difficult to guess. Keep your information in a secure place at home, especially if you have roommates or you employ outside help like a nanny or a housekeeper, or if you're having work done in your house. And Eva just mentioned the phishing. Never click on links sent in an unsolicited email or text. Instead, go to the source, type in the web address that you know. One of the best things that you can do to avoid identity theft is to monitor your accounts and review financial statements regularly. Check the mail for statements for accounts of credit cards that you did not open, and make sure you are receiving statements that you are actually expecting. It's also critical for you to continuously monitor your credit reports. And as I mentioned earlier, you can go to annualcreditreport.com to check those there. But that way you can see if there are any signs of identity theft, like unauthorized accounts opened in your name or a new address popping up. Also, you can avoid identity theft by using some basic tips to protect your files and devices, like keeping your antivirus software up to date. That's not just enough, though. You also have to make sure you regularly update it, its virus definition and scanning on your computer. And finally, you should look for indications that if you're doing any kind of online shopping, that website is secure. Eva?
Next slide, please, Alex. Those are all great tips, good information, and I highly recommend all of them. I just want to follow up on the good password management. Boy, that is key. We are such creatures of habit that we want to keep it simple, and we reuse the same simple password across multiple accounts. And guess what? The thieves know it. They know that if they can compromise an account that maybe you don't think is that important, maybe it's a subscription or something. But if you're using that same login and password across some of your more important accounts, your financial accounts, your bank, your credit cards, the thieves know it. So using a strong and unique password across all of your different accounts is one of the most proactive steps and strong steps that you can take. The other thing that you can do, Shamika touched on monitoring your accounts. And that's a great tip. There are some easy tools to do that. You can set up alerts on your existing account so that you get a text message every time there's a transaction on one of your accounts. And you can set up multi-factor authentication. A lot of times this is opt-in. And so it's available to you, but it's not required. It's not mandatory. So you can set that up proactively. And for any, business owners or business leaders that are listening, if you have the option of making multi-factor, turning that on for your customers, I would really strongly encourage you to do so. And then the last thing is setting up online accounts, even ones that you don't think you're going to regularly use or use at all for that matter. The thieves know that that's an opening, and if they beat you to it and create that online account, then they have access. So I would encourage people to set up those accounts even if you don't plan on using them. Yes, it's one more login and password that you have to remember. I understand that, but it really does reduce your risk. And with all of those passwords, look, there are different tools you can use. Using a password manager, if that's intuitive to you and an option, certainly go that route. Sometimes it's as simple as using a passphrase. The new advice, this is a dynamic space and it changes often, is use something that is memorable to you, at least 12 characters long, but it doesn't have to be that word salad jumble of unrecognizable characters. You can use upper and lowercase, a number and a symbol, but maybe it's a line out of a poem, or just again, something that's memorable to you, but not something like your mother's maiden name or your dog's name. And that's all. Okay, that's my follow-up on that. If you want to dig deeper into these tools, it is available on the ITRC website. Next slide, please. And now I'll hand it off to Shamika. She's going to talk about a lot of the FTC advice and tools.
Thanks, Eva. So I mentioned credit freezes a little bit earlier, but if you've experienced any kind of identity theft, you should really consider placing a fraud alert or a credit freeze on your reports. Credit freezes are free for everybody, including kids under 16 and incapacitated adults. They limit your access to your credit reports, so no one, including yourself, can open a new account until the freeze is lifted. It's also, like I said, it's free to place, but it's also free to remove, and it lasts until you lift it or remove it. But it will require a few extra steps the next time you want to apply for credit. You can set up a credit freeze by contacting each of the 3 credit bureaus. You have to contact each one of them, not just one. A fraud alert makes companies verify your identity before granting new credit in your name. It's also free, and it also lasts a year. But you only have to contact one of the 3 credit bureaus to place it. So which one you choose and which option is right for you depends on your personal situation. But freezes are generally best for people who aren't planning to take out new credit. Next slide. So what happens in the event that you experience identity theft? I'm going to go over a few tools that can help you recover. So of course, I've mentioned IDTheftWeek a bunch of times already today, but the FTC encourages you to go to this website as a first step. It's the federal government's one-stop resource for people to report and recover from identity theft. The website is in both English and Spanish, and there's a ton of resources, including draft letters, and then this is where you also would get an identity theft affidavit if you need one. Of course, there are other organizations that have great resources too, of course, especially the ITRC. But I'm focusing first on the IDTheftWeek because it's my job, of course. But the FTC partners with ITRC to help us with some more difficult or some more complicated identity theft cases that we have. And we're grateful that they're able to assist people who need some extra help. Next slide. I also encourage you to visit consumer.gov. It's the FTC's website for consumer information. It provides consumer protection basics. So there you can learn more about getting and checking your credit report. I know I've mentioned that a couple times today. There are also tips and information about scams and identity theft.
And this is where you would report scams. Report fraud.ftc.gov.
Yes, sorry, I think I was on mute for a minute. So this is a new website that we have to report scams, and you go to reportfraud.ftc.gov. You tell us what happened. After you answer a few questions and submit your report, then you'll get a report number that you can use to update your report. It also gives you tips on what to do next. If you provide your email, you'll get this information in an email as well. By reporting, you're helping the FTC and our law enforcement partners build cases that stop scams, and also you're helping to alert others in your community about current fraud trends. Eva?
And next slide, please, Alex. So of course, this is a list of all the Identity Theft Resource Center services, and they're all available online. I think my big overall message, folks, is you do not have to figure this out on your own. This is a really complicated space, and the thieves are very savvy. And sometimes when you get hit with something or you don't understand it, we all have this human tendency to say, oh, wow, this is too complicated. I can't figure this out. I think I'm, just going to move on with my life. And I really want to encourage everyone to use the tools that are available. The FTC has amazing tools. Please leverage them. Of course, ITRC, we too have amazing tools that you can use. They're all free to the public. The CFPB has all kinds of information, referrals, and tools. Fraud.org has all kinds of tools. You don't have to try to figure this out. There are people that can help you and specifically listen to your situation, because that's one of the big challenges with this problem, is that every case is unique. Every person, every individual is unique. And even though we've talked a lot about data and identity credentials, we do understand that there is a human being behind every piece of this data and every fraudulent transaction that occurs. So don't think you have to figure this out alone. Go seek out those resources. They're there for you. Next slide, please, Alex. And with that, we will open it up